Hi you guys, let me know what you think about this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.
Race. This is about racism. Taking brown people and actively removing them from the country, whether they have a criminal history or not, whether they're American citizens or not, babies that are American citizens, children with cancer, absolutely not a single olive branch to them, don't give a shit. But when it comes to that color South Africans, all of a sudden we're taking them in as refugees. You know, the very people who thrived on an apartheid system in South Africa. And what kicked this all off were the South Africans on this app that were like, hey, Americans, stop real quick. And these videos are of them literally telling Americans that these refugees that are coming in are not the best of their society. And I hope by now most people have understood that nothing that this regime does is by accident. It's on purpose. It's letting you know these are the people we consider refugees, but don't talk to us about Syrians. Don't talk to us about Palestinians. Like, don't talk to us about any of those. You know what? Because they're not the complexion that we give a shit about. Oh, and Ukraine, well, guess what? That doesn't bode well with our Ruski buddy. So guess what? That doesn't count either. Now, we want some strong segregationist roots returning to this country. Oh, this isn't about race. This is about racism.
Shame on the United States. Shame. Shame on Donald Trump and his whole administration. So check this out, y'all. White South Africans granted refugee status by the Trump administration. Now let that sink in. Look at these people. These people are the descendants of the colonizers and the apartheid rulers in South Africa. So the government over there is using their constitution to help give land back to the native Africans. They're buying land from South Africans who own 70% of all the land. And you go, how did they do that? They stole it. Then you got Elon Musk and Donald Trump talking about there's a genocide happening. There's no genocide. The only genocides that are happening right now are in Gaza, the Congo, South Sudan. Those are really genocides, and those are really refugees. Then you got Trump, remember, talking about they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, when he's referring to Haitians. That's not happening either, and it wasn't happening. They have real status to be here, to work. But these guys, these Afrikaners, these poor farmers, they just, for whatever reason, can't make money in South Africa. They haven't been on their job. You notice there ain't no millionaires and billionaires Afrikaners coming to the United States as refugees. It's the poors. They got money for wars but can't feed the poor. And I'm talking to you white Americans, especially the ones who are in the lower class or poor. This really affects you. These Afrikaners are about to come over here, get free housing, free medical. They're going to get jobs. They're going to get education. And meanwhile, a lot of you are going to continue to live in rural areas, in your trailers, in your apartments, and you're going to lose your jobs because of Doge. These guys are here to get all the resources. America, that's a shame, y'all. That is a shame.
So listen, before I go to sleep, I need to tell you guys this, okay? So I chatted with someone from South Africa who is Afrikaner today, and who is going to be applying to come to the United States. And she was trying to explain her plight because she was seeing that a lot of people do not want Afrikaners over here as refugees. Okay, now I'm gonna strictly say that they don't want Afrikaners. We don't want Afrikaners over here as refugees with refugee status. Okay, so she continues to explain herself, and she does not mention anything about genocide. She doesn't mention anything about someone taking her land from her. She doesn't mention any of that as to the reason why she plans on coming to America with her children. This is the reason that she gave, which is not a qualification for a refugee status, okay? She said that she couldn't find a job. Not only did she say she couldn't find a job, but she said she couldn't find a job because of her race. She believed she couldn't find a job because of her race. And she also believed that her children did not have a future in South Africa. That doesn't qualify to be a refugee. That honestly does not qualify. Do you know how many people in the United States of America can't find work? Do you know how many people just lost their jobs in the United States of America because of this administration? I mean, do they have refugee status? Can they fly anywhere and be like, oh, okay, well then, give me food, clothing, shelter, and everything, and your government needs to pay for it because we're refugees because we can't find a job here in the United States of America. Now, I'm not gonna lie. She was like, I don't have anything against my people in South Africa, nor do I, and I'm not racist. I'm just Afrikaner, and I just want to find a job. But I said, but you're not a refugee, not because not because you can't find a job. Simply because you can't find a job, you think you're a refugee? If that's the case, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't make you a refugee. She said nothing about any of the quote unquote genocide, any of the oh my gosh, all she said was she couldn't find a job. That's it. And the White House is allowing this. So listen.
With today's arrival of 59 white South African refugees to the United States, brought over by chartered plane, I think that we need to have a talk about apartheid, the history of South Africa, and why people are upset with Trump's decision to only welcome these folks and no other refugees. If you didn't know, in South Africa, white people actually only make up about 7.3% of the overall population. Now, I'm going to use AI overview screenshots here just for the sake of visibility. They're easy to read and put onto my background. Trust me, I read further than just the AI overview. However, being only about 7.2 to 7.3% of the entire population of this nation, they own a disproportionately large amount of the land and the wealth, up to about 72% of privately held farmland, whereas the black population owns an extremely small percentage of that wealth and that land. Why? Apartheid. Under that system, much of what was already owned by black South Africans was seized and redistributed to white farmers. It was done purposely by a completely white-run government in order to make sure all the wealth and power rested with the white population. But now you see the South African government, which is no longer white-run and led, is taking steps to make up for that. Essentially reparations for all the land and generational wealth that was ripped away and stolen from the black people who already lived in South Africa before colonizers arrived. Now, despite claims of massive amounts of unaliving of white farmers and the government taking their land and oftentimes not offering them anything in exchange, the government argues that is not the case. Although there is a newer law, I believe signed into effect in January, that does say the government could take land from a white farmer, a white landowner, and redistribute it, give it to black farmers without even having to give anything back to the farmer. The government says that's not really happening. It's just a caveat. If they've tried to come to an agreement, it cannot happen, and the government can determine that this is the way it ought to be based on that law. And that law, of course, is getting argued. There's pushback. People are fighting it. It's not like it's just happening and there's no talks about it whatsoever. But the thing is, despite being a very small percentage of the population of this country, the white people own a massive amount of the wealth. And that's because of oppressive policies that they had in place for generations. And now that there's finally a push for some sort of actual equality, which does require the government to step in, they're uncomfortable. And I guess that means that they're in danger enough that they should be the only group of people we grant refugee status to. The only group. Oh, and by the way, South Africa is not the only country in the world that sees this sort of racially divided wealth disparity. In the United States, as of 2022, white households held over 80% of all the wealth, while we're only about 64% of the population. It's in our history too. And I think that what's going on in South Africa is making the folks here who have their eyes set on supremacy, it's making them nervous. So they think that they've got to do something to fight back. I do not care what they try to say. This is about, and always has been about, racism. With today's arrival...
Call out Donald Trump for being a huge hypocrite. Imagine that. Donald Trump, a hypocrite. Donald Trump, I thought we weren't accepting any refugees from any part of the world. Donald Trump, how is it possible that you gave an order for the State Department to make arrangements to send a plane to South Africa to pick up South African refugees? And Donald, they all look pretty pasty. They all look, definitely of that pasty color. I got to be careful when we talk about colors. And, I know y'all may not remember, but Crayola used to have that 64 box of every color in the world. And there's only one color in that Crayola box of 64 that Donald Trump seems to like. And any other color in that box of crayons, Donald Trump doesn't seem to like. My Latinos, I want to understand this. Now, he's accepting refugees from South Africa. And who else is from South Africa? Elon Musk? Interesting. But any other refugees from Central America, South America, Latin America, any other Caribbean country, Ukraine, you name it, especially those from south of the border, we're trying to deport them and send them out, reject their TPS, cancel their TPS as fast as we can, even when they're law-abiding people. But South Africans, especially those really pasty ones, that one color in the crayon box of 64, there's one color Donald Trump doesn't seem to have a problem with using that color in that crayon box. You know which one it is. What do you think? What is Donald Trump's favorite Crayola color? We all know what it is. Look at the South Africans. You'll know the answer. So my Latinos, y'all going to keep up this voting in 2026 and 2028? Yep. You're going to FAFO too. Yep. What do y'all think? Love to hear from my Democrats, my MAGAs, my crazies, my cuckoos, my burned out light bulbs, and all my Latinos, all of y'all that voted for Trump. You see how he does you and your people. You weren't in that box of Crayola crayons that he picked out. He just picked out one color that he liked for his favorite color to color with.
In the event that this piece of information has not been made available to you or you just don't know, I'm here to inform you that this Sunday, the Trump administration is set to receive a group of South African refugees. These are white South African refugees, okay? This group is going to comprise or consist of 49 people coming in from Johannesburg. They will be boarding a private jet, landing in Texas, where they will then be transported to their new homes. You mean to tell me that the same administration that has been going out of its way to deport the brown and black migrants that we currently have here in America, to the point where they are bribing people to self-deport with the incentives of getting $1,000, okay? They're making sure that they are deporting our migrants without due process. Okay, they're not even making sure that any of these people are actual criminals, going out of its way to deport the already existent migrants that are here in America, only for them to show us that we've always been accepting to migrants. They just gotta be, you understand? They gotta be the color that we want. You know what's the really funny part is that Trump and the administration is stating that these individuals, these white South African refugees, are dealing with racial injustice and discrimination, and that's the reason why they're opening America, to them. Do you want to know what is the racial discrimination and injustice that these white South African refugees are claiming? It's black South Africans fighting and claiming their land back. That's the racial discrimination. That's the racial injustice. The fact that the black people are claiming their land back. Let me give y'all a quick little history lesson. So during colonialism and the apartheid, right, the white settlers were able to come in and nearly take over all of the land in South Africa. By force, by the way. I want to make it clear. By force. Even at the end of apartheid, which ended in 1994, a group of people that made up less than 10% of South Africa's population owned nearly 70% of its land. You know what that meant for the black South Africans? They were pushed into poverty, okay? They were pushed into barren land. They were denied the right to buying and owning property. So land reform was always the goal. That was always the goal. Although every time they made the attempts to move into that direction, things were blocking it. I know you know what I'm talking about. So now politicians and movements are demanding for what they call land expropriation. Yes, land expropriation without compensation. Basically meaning you will return this land to its rightful owner and we will not pay you for that. You should have never had it to begin with. We're not giving you any type of compensation for the land that you should have never had to begin with. I understand back in your day, you guys were used to getting slavery reparations. No. So now because of these movements and these demands for basically give me my shit back, right? These white South African farmers are now claiming to being targeted and persecuted for being white. I can't even. And now the Trump administration is set to receive these refugees, and I use that term loosely because they're not refugees. You understand? So the administration is set to take them in under the claims of their being racially discriminated against and profiled, trying to paint these white South Africans as victims. Whole time, they've been benefiting from a system that they stole from by force. There's no racial discrimination here. There's no racial injustice. This is actual justice. The true owners are finally getting their land back. That's justice. And those white settlers, descendants of white settlers, should stay where they fucking are and move with the times. You're kicking our people out that literally contribute to our economy, but you want to accept these motherfuckers? In the event.
So looks like the Trump administration and the Afrikaner refugees are running into some pushback. Just like I knew they would. The Episcopal Church has said they're not going to help resettle them. The reason why they're not going to help resettle them is basically because the Trump administration is playing racism. You know, that thing they like to do and rename it something else. Well, okay, so here it is. The Episcopal Church doesn't think it's right and it's against their morale to help resettle only white refugees. They're looking at how the Trump administration is disregarding black refugees and brown refugees, but they're okay with the white refugees. So they said, no, we're going to end our contract with the government. We're not doing that. So there's the pushback that I knew was going to come. Now, the Church World Service, which is a global group, a global faith-based group, that's a mix of a whole bunch of different denominations. They're going to still step in and do something. They're going to still step in and help resettle them. And their reasoning is because they still want to help people, no matter what. Whoever can be a refugee, they're going to help any refugee, no matter what. So that's what's going on now ever since the Afrikaners have arrived in the United States of America. Well, here they are.
I know swallow.
New racist talking point just dropped. So this week in the news, you may have heard that the Trump administration welcomed 54 South African refugees, white refugees from South Africa. And this is stirring up some controversy, and a lot of people are trying to talk about, the black government of South Africa is trying to steal all of the land from the white farmers. And because of this, the farmers are fleeing, and they're refugees now, apparently, according to the MAGA crowd. So I looked into the numbers, and I thought this was very interesting. So I've seen claims that more than 90% of the farm land and 90% of the food produced in South Africa is from white farmers. The real number is something more like around 80% of the land is owned by whites in South Africa, but only 18% of farming households are actually white. So when you look at that, you kind of get the picture that while white people may own most of the farmland, they're not the majority of farmers, right? They're really less than 80% of the actual farmers in South Africa. Most of the farmhands and the labor is black South Africans who are doing the labor. So, and this is very similar to the United States. I talk about this all the time with folks who say, farmers in America. When I hear the word farmers in America, you think about some old white people living in a farmhouse and farming. But the reality is that it's very similar numbers in the United States. Somewhere around 70% of all the farmers in the U.S. are white, but they're not actually farmers, because over 70% of farmhands are immigrants. So if over 70% of farmhands are immigrants, then that means that white people do not make up the majority of actual people who are working the farmland. They're just landowners. Same thing in South Africa. They're landowners. They're not actual farmers. They hire black South Africans to do the actual farm work. The same as in the United States, where, yes, white people own the majority of the land here, but they're not the people who are actually doing the farm work. And it's absurd to me that we call them farmers, because they're not actually farmers. They're not out there in the fields picking the crops that make it to our plates. They're just the people who own the land and who hire people and import people who are undocumented. Ironically, the majority of farming landowners are Republicans. So if you do the math on where undocumented immigrants come from, they come from white MAGA Republicans in the United States. But anyway, the South Africa thing really threw me when I saw people on the Twitter sphere talking about how most of the farmers in South Africa are white and taking the white people's land and kicking the white people out and turning the white people into refugees. White refugees from South Africa, that this is going to destroy all of the farming in South Africa and the people won't have any food because they're targeting the whites. But it's just an absurd reality. They're landowners, and the South African government did pass a law this year. There has been 0 acres so far of land, by the way, which have been seized by the black South African government. South African government has seized 0, I will repeat, 0 acres of land from any white farmers or farming landowners in South Africa. But they did pass a law that allows them to start increasing the percentage of farm owners in South Africa who are black. So it's not a white genocide. These white people who are fleeing are not refugees. They're not running from some racist black government stealing all of white people's land. Most of the farmers are black. Most of the farm landowners are white. There's a huge inequality in South Africa because of that. It's a very similar situation to the United States. And when you hear all of these talking points, do the math, put it together yourself. This is just a new racist talking point, and that's all that it is a racist.
Please don't forget to follow.